Hey everybody, it's Rob. You are about to hear our amazing interview with Kent Meyer, a retired EMT. Just as a warning, there will be some graphic content involving some of Kent's experiences as an EMT. If you wish to skip any of that, please go to about the 16-minute mark. And if you need support at any point in time, please contact the crisis hotline at 988 where somebody can help. Thanks. Welcome, everybody, into the Please Stay Inside podcast. My name is Rob. This is episode number 15. We are joined today by Kent Meyer. He is a 14-year paramedic and the creator of Project Hope EMS, a group for first responders who need some support after what they have gone through as first responders, looking to address the PTSD issue among the first responder community. Kent, welcome on.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
It is a real pleasure to get to have you, Kent. Very much looking forward to hearing about the project today. So first and foremost, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I was a paramedic for 14 years, and then I developed PTSD, and now I work in behavioral health as a behavioral health tech. And I teach groups and classes and do one-on-ones. And so I stay very busy with my 3 boys and my wife and our 2 dogs. And that's basically me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I would certainly bet that keeps you busy. I mean, a family, and it sounds like, you've gone straight from being a first responder for so long, straight into behavioral health tech. I mean, that's amazing.
Yes, I did.
Wow. I would love to, I guess, talk about that transition and what that was like for you. But I also want to talk about being a paramedic, everything. I'm kind of trying to figure out where to start. Well, let's kind of take it from the beginning. What is it that I guess got you into wanting to be a paramedic?
Well, I was in the Navy. I retired from the Navy, and when I got out, we moved back to my ex-wife's hometown. And I didn't know anybody. So I joined the fire hall for the social aspect of it.
Mm.
And they said, would you go to EMT school if we pay for it? And I said, sure. And the first day of school, they said, who here is going to make this a career? And I was like, oh, people do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, I don't know if I'd be able to handle it. So I thought, well, I'll just go until I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got started, and I loved it. It was so I was a mechanic in the Navy on submarines, so it was quite the role switch.
Yeah. Wow, what was that role switch like? I mean, going from working on submarines to EMS.
It was exciting because it was an adrenaline rush on the submarines with all the real emergencies we had and stuff, and then I found that again in EMS, and I had a lot of good mentors, and that helped me along the way and molded me, so to speak, and but it just came to a time where it was too much because they don't teach you coping skills. In EMT school or paramedic school or the fire academy or the police academy. I still don't think they do. There's a shift going on where they're talking about resiliency and things like that. And it's funny because the class, there was like 3 slides for mental health care.
Wow.
And I remember they said, so you may see something that bothers you and you may need to talk to someone, and but you just need to eat right, take vacations, and get plenty of sleep, which as an EMS person, you never eat right, you never get good sleep, and you rarely have time for vacation. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Right. It seems kind of counterintuitive for, how busy you are as an EMT.
Yeah.
Wow. So, given that all of that just like those 3 slides were dedicated to the profession, what were you kind of expecting going into the EMT role?
I really didn't know. I remember the first call I went on was a very elderly woman who coded,
Mm.
and it was the first person I did CPR on, and of course she didn't make it, and I was like, I don't feel anything. Shouldn't I be feeling something? How should I feel? And then you learn to put that aside. Excuse me, I'm getting over COVID.
All good.
I So what I did for a coping skill, which turned out to be not a good coping skill, was I looked at the person as a job.
Mm.
Like, this is broken, let's do this. They need fluid, let's do that. This is going on, let's do that. I didn't look at them as a person. I was, empathetic and everything, but
Mm.
and then you drop them off, and that's over, and you put it in the back of your head, and it's done with. Well, you can only store so much in the
Mm.
back of your head before it like makes its way out.
Mm.
And I suppose it's different for everybody because not everybody gets PTSD.
Sure.
And I know resiliency is a big part of it. Some people naturally have more resiliency than others
Mm.
just by things they've been through in life when they were younger. And when I heard about resiliency, I was like, what the heck is resiliency?
Mm.
And so, but anyways, yeah, it was a poor coping skill.
Mm. Yeah. Did you find that that developed naturally, or was that something that you consciously had to try to do?
It was more natural than anything. And pretty much everybody, I don't want to say everybody, but
Sure.
it seems like most of EMS workers that I worked with would approach the same way.
Mm.
It's funny, the calls that bother you are not the ones that are real gory or uh, things like that. For one, we see I don't watch horror movies anymore because I don't like the idea of entertaining myself with things that I actually seen.
Mm.
But Hollywood makes it look recognizable
Mm.
for entertainment value. In real life, the gory stuff, it doesn't look recognizable. It's not real.
Mm.
What really gets to you is what pulls on your heartstrings.
Mm.
Like when you work on a kid who's the same age as your teenager,
Wow.
or when all of a sudden you're meeting the family and they're telling you all about that person, or they're just it's the heartstring things. Like I had a 4-year-old little girl who told me about how her dad was beating up her mom and was looking for her and her brother to kill them. It just pure innocence. And it's like, you can't forget
Right.
stuff like that. You can't put that in the back of your head.
Mm.
So, in other first responders I talk to, it's the same thing as what tugs on their heartstrings. They personalized it,
Mm.
instead of keeping it a job,
Right.
because you can't always do that.
Right.
You know, it's just not possible. But so, and you never know what you're going to relate to.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. And so it sounds like it's those moments that just really kind of hit you in the moment.
Yeah.
Mm. How does that, I guess, feel different from the compartmentalization? Because I mean, I know you said that, you kind of unconsciously sometimes you put it in a box and you say, I'll get to this later. And then these other times it's a bit harder to do that. I wonder, as you're growing into this profession and you're beginning to approach things, and I imagine, you compartmentalize a couple times. What's it like that time when it doesn't so easily go into that box?
It stays in the front of your brain
Mm.
or your head or what your mind. Uh, you know, uh, the call that pushed me over the edge was a burn patient.
Mm.
And, statistically, mathematically, you can tell if a person is going to die by how much percentage of burns and degree of burns they have on their body.
Mm.
And this lady was covered head to toe in
Wow.
burns. And she was still talking to us, and she was begging me to help her. And, I never had that before, to have a patient knowing that they're going to die,
Mm.
but they're still alive talking to you. And because, and there's no hope, but even with a heart attack, you're like, well, we might get him back. You got hope.
Mhm.
But this was the first time that it's like, she's not going to make it. And
Mm.
I struggled with it because, and I'm going to try not to cry.
It's all good.
I, I struggled with it because I knew, I knew she was going to die. And I told her that I'm going to give you medications to put you to sleep, and give you pain medications, take the pain away. I'm going to breathe for you uh, to make you more comfortable. But I didn't tell her she was never going to wake up again.
Mm.
And her husband, you know, hindsight's 2020. He's standing right outside the ambulance.
Mm.
I didn't give him a chance to say goodbye.
Mm.
And it, we transported her to the hospital, which was close by. A helicopter was waiting to take her to a burn center. And I was just numb. And then I went to the back of the ambulance to start cleaning up, and the bottoms of her feet were laying on the floor. And I just lost it. And it wouldn't go away. I mean, I can, to this day, it's so vivid. And I can even feel my lungs stinging from the smoke, and I can feel the sweat pouring off my forehead because we shut the air conditioner off in the back of the unit. I just can remember every detail.
Mm.
And, but you think you moved past things,
Mhm.
think you're doing good, and then all of a sudden you have a flashback or something, and you're reminded, you're swept off your feet, and you're reminded, I still have PTSD.
Right, right. I mean, naturally so. I mean, I would imagine it unthinkable to, I mean, witness something like that and to be around something like that. And given that that's, the nature of the job is such a terrifying combination. And so, I mean, I also think it's very natural that, and that something like that would really be difficult to put into that box and to compartmentalize. And so, I mean, I hear from you, this was kind of like this was the moment that I guess something kind of changed for you.
Yeah, so I started having nightmares,
Mm.
horrible nightmares, and to the point I didn't want to sleep.
Mm.
And because I lived alone at the time, I was divorced, and um, the worst time for a first responder, even if they don't have PTSD, is probably at night
Mm.
when they're alone with their thoughts. And I always say that's when the demons come. And to this day, I feel I have it under control pretty good.
Mm.
Um, but to this day, the nights are still the worst for me.
Mm.
I still have nightmares. I never get a full night's sleep because I'll wake up and I'll have to ground myself, and
Mhm.
and I take medications for nightmares and stuff, but I think it helps, but I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, and I appreciate that perspective. I mean, that moment of kind of being by yourself at night, it sounds like that's the moment where there are no distractions and it's kind of just you and your mind.
Yeah, the time I slept the best was when I was at the station.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
think because I felt safe,
Hmm.
because I was among other first responders who were looking out for me, so I could relax and sleep. And there was distractions. You had to have your in the mindset, I'm ready to go.
Hmm.
You know, but I feel the public takes all first responders for granted
Mm,
because we see horrific things and we're having a normal reaction
mm,
because we're not meant to see those things.
mm,
And I just, I kind of forgot where I was going with that, but they, with EMS, police, fire, it's not like you just have one call a day
right.
and then you guys sit around and talk about it. And you're like, most of the calls are routine,
Mm,
but there are days where you have bad calls in a row and you're dropping off and you're on your way to the next one and it's another bad call and there's just no time to process
mm,
and you're just trying to put it in the back of your head and move on to the next one because you're in and then you have this mentality that well I'm a rescuer
mm,
that's my job and I should be above this. And then when I developed PTSD, I didn't know what it was. I
mm,
didn't know I had it. I thought I was losing my mind
mm,
um, because you don't, uh, and you're afraid to tell anybody because you don't want them, the stigma. I
mm,
didn't want to tell my coworkers, and I didn't want to tell my family because I didn't want them to worry. So you wind up isolating was my
mm,
go-to was the biggest thing was isolating and I started drinking a lot and I would stay awake to the point where I was sleep deprived and I was having audible hallucinations.
mm,
I knew they weren't there or weren't real, but I was like also knew that I shouldn't be hearing them.
mm. Right, right. So I mean, I can definitely see how, I mean, when you're feeling sleep deprived, you're going through all of this, you're having nightmares, and you're dealing with all of this on your own. I can see how somebody can get to the conclusion that I feel like I'm losing my mind right now.
Yeah, so I tried to commit suicide, and my boss found me.
Mm,
He broke into my house. He broke a window. He suspected, and he broke a window, gained access to the house, and called for one of the units.
mm,
And I went to a mental health facility for, I think it was 14 days. But there they diagnosed me with PTSD, and I can't tell you what it was like a relief
mm,
because it's like, well, there's a name to what I have. I'm
right.
not losing my mind, and it's treatable. You
Mm,
know, we can work with this. I can work with this,
mm,
but it was the lowest low, and I felt like I was the only one in the world going through
mm,
it. And so I quit my job
mm,
because I knew that I needed to help myself before I could help others.
right.
And uh, so I moved to South Dakota to be with my siblings while I got therapy and I took intensive CBT therapy and got started on medications. But I just felt so empty, hollow,
Mm,
worthless. And I kept saying to myself, I just want to be the old me.
mm,
And I went through the VA.
mm,
And this lady that I had, and I wish I could find her, they go by a book, and it's for PTSD for combat veterans. She right in front of me, like, was ripping pages out, writing paragraphs, and she redid the whole book
wow.
just to fit me.
Mm,
And you know, she saved my life. But um, one day I woke up and I said, I just kept pressing on. I was like, it's got to get better because
mm,
it surely can't get any worse. And one day I woke up and I said, I don't want to be the old me. I like the new me
mm,
because When you lose your job, when you quit or lose it, get fired or whatever, move on,
Mm,
that's your identity.
right.
It's who you are, and you're like there. You tell yourself there's nothing else I can do, which is so untrue.
Mm,
Being a first responder prepares you for many opportunities, job opportunities, but it's just the mindset we have.
mm,
The CBT, the distorted thoughts that we have, and
mm,
so uh, I it just got better and better. I never thought anybody would ever love me again. Who would love me? I don't even love myself.
mm,
And I met my wife, and uh, I always said I was going to do something for first responders because I didn't want them to feel like I did when I was going through it
right.
all alone. Because the biggest turning point for me that got me thinking that was after I got out of the hospital, I went back to the ambulance station to go to work.
Mm,
And I had this diagnosis as PTSD. There were medics who have been there for years, been doing it forever, that would come to me in private and start talking to me and breaking down, crying, and telling me these
mm,
stories. And I thought, oh my gosh, how many of us are suffering in silence?
right.
Because I never would have thought in a million years these guys were struggling.
Mm,
And so I realized I'm not alone. There's
right.
definitely a lot of us out there suffering in silence.
Mm,
So I started the group. I didn't know what I was doing. I started a page called PTSD and Paramedics, EMTs, and First Responders. And that took off. But I wanted something more personal. So I started Project Hope EMS. And it's a group, and that way people could interact with each other.
mm,
And because on pages it's very just post, you make remarks, but groups are more personal.
right.
And I remember when I had like 250 members, I would go through each member and message them, how are you doing today,
Mm,
and talk to them just to get people to interact and start talking. And that was what, 7 years ago.
wow.
Today we have over, with the groups and the pages, over 40,000 followers in over 50
Wow.
different countries. I've talked to people in distress in uh, Africa, Egypt,
Mm,
all over the world. It's just amazing. And I did it all right here in the basement on my little computer. But I've always had volunteer staff who
mm,
have PTSD, but have gotten treatment and are doing good. And they also have background like in CISM,
mm,
things like that. We're not therapists.
mm,
We are a peer support group.
right.
And so that's what we do, and it's pretty much an autopilot now. I
Mm,
talk to people when I have time, and then I have volunteer staff that talk to people, and it's been a good thing.
yeah, it sounds like an amazing thing. I mean, you are actively working against a stigma and you're actively facilitating the conversation between 40,000 people. I mean, how does it, coming from the perspective that you come from and what you've been through, what does it mean to you to be able to see where the group is right now?
I'm so humbled every time. It's just when I first, because I went on the internet to look
Mm,
for help, and there wasn't any. I think Code Green was the only organization out there at the time.
mm,
So when I started out, it was a fairly new concept, and I've helped others. Would come to me and say, "I want to start a group for first responders,"
mm,
but and so I helped them. And some people don't want to do that because they're territorial. But I look at it as a group or a organization is like a church.
Mm-hmm.
We're all preaching the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
but somebody likes this church better because they feel more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can help people grow an organization, and I've done that several times, I have no problem with that
Mm-hmm.
because I can't do it on my own.
Right,
you
right,
know,
right. Which I
you
mean,
know, 40,000 is not that many people. It really
mhm,
isn't. And I know that's in other countries, but I did the math one time a long time ago, and I figured based on the statistics from the numbers I come up with, there was over 500,000 first responders who probably had PTSD, either diagnosed or undiagnosed.
right.
That's a lot,
It
you
is.
know, compared to 40,000. It's like
It
we're just
is.
scratching the surface.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
And it is, it does seem to be such a massive problem. I mean, just again, given the nature of the job that you do, there is so much that you're exposed to. I mean, to be a first responder is to, in a sense, live a totally different experience, a totally different life than a civilian. Like, we pass by a fire or a car accident, what have you, and it's like, what an inconvenience. Like, I need to get to work. But for somebody
right.
who's there dealing with that, and that might be, like you said, like the fourth, the fifth thing that they've done that day. I mean, that is such a, just even trying to put myself in that mindset, it's such a different way of life.
It really is. And it's hard on families, it's
Mm,
hard on marriages. I have missed so many holidays, birthdays,
mm,
recitals, and thought nothing of it you know, because that's the job, you
right.
know. But and the family was always like, "Well, that's the sacrifice he makes for."
Mm,
But it uh, it is a rough way of life.
mm, absolutely. And with that part of you, because I mean, I imagine, you get into a profession like this wanting to help. I'd imagine like there's something in you that, you want to serve as you did in the Navy and you want to continue that kind of service. How did that part of you battle against the part of you that was really having a hard time? The part of you that said, I had to remain steadfast, I had to keep helping. And then the part of you that was saying, there's something really, really wrong going on.
Well, so I found myself getting annoyed with patients
Mm,
in scenarios, and I was like, "This isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to be. This isn't helping them." And so that was kind of a red flag for me that, uh, even like on simple calls, it's like, look, you should always be empathetic and
mm,
not annoyed and stuff. But I just was, and I became numb. There was no rush anymore.
mm,
And especially like on really bad calls. And I was like, something's wrong. I'm not feeling anything.
right.
And that I knew that was an issue. So,
Mm, I hear you. And I mean, I think that's a really important signal for people in helping professions to be able to notice for sure that the burnout has occurred. I'm numb to this. It's a day-to-day thing at this point. Which I
yeah.
mean, it's I can imagine that, being somebody who wants to help, it can hurt in a sense to get to that point where it is just where you do become numb to it and you do start getting annoyed. Um, and it's got to be difficult to overcome that, to getting to the point of like, okay, like I can't continue to do this. I something needs to kind of give at some point. So, and I mean, in talking about just the culture of first responders, I know you worked with EMT primarily. Um, I mean, how do people talk about this? Like, if you go to a call, then you get in the ambulance, you go back to the station, whatever. Like, what? How do people talk about the job?
Well, honestly, dark humor
Sure.
is a way that it became real uncomfortable if somebody got emotional and started to talk about something.
Mm,
And I think the reason is because we knew that we should be feeling the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we put these walls up.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, I'm sure I was part of the stigma just as bad as other people,
Sure.
like, well, maybe you need to go do something else if you can't handle it, or you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Right.
Um, there's just not enough like debriefings. I'm sure you heard of those. Like after a bad call, they have a debriefing.
Mm.
Out of 14 years, I've been to one debriefing.
Wow.
It is it that I only been to one bad call, or are we not taking care of our first responders?
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I mean, in thinking about things that kind of need to change, it does sound like, things like debriefing is something that can be different. The culture of like, hey, like we can talk about this, we can have a difficult time with this, and still, continue to do things. I mean, it seems like there are some things that can change. But I guess I wonder from your perspective as somebody who's been inside of it, what do you imagine might be able to change?
I think the peer support program, like you watch on TV, I joke about it, like the guy who said, yeah, I had the idea, but Google came up with it and
Mm-hmm.
stole it from me. Well, when I was going through it, I thought we should have like a peer support program
Right.
where we could go to a peer. And then all of a sudden they were coming out, and I was like, they stole my idea, but um, it's good idea because management has to put that in place.
Mm,
And that's sending the signal that management's on board with this, that it's
right.
okay to not be okay.
Right.
And I think that should be in place in every first responder, uh, in every fire station, every police station, every ambulance station,
Mm,
because it sends a signal, and it would help so much diffuse situations instead of people letting it build up.
right.
And along with that, they can have training like on good coping skills
Right.
and how to handle certain situations and identify people who need further help
Mm,
through therapy or psychiatry or something like that, or maybe
mm,
don't make them afraid to come forward
mm,
and work because they're going to lose their job or they're going to be an outcast.
right.
But I really think the peer support program, and I know it's popped up in a lot of places. I think that's an awesome program. I think
Mm,
that it should be legislated where it's a requirement.
mm. Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I think that there definitely has to be something done. Again, like you said, in management at the top level, legislatively, to really begin to set that norm. Because I imagine that if you are just one EMT, one firefighter, one police officer, it's difficult for you to say, I'm going to take on the burden of breaking the stigma myself and then advocating for this and kind of outing yourself as like, I'm really going through this and I need some more support.
But there are people who do that,
Absolutely.
and they win over management and they get the ball rolling and stuff. I know a guy here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a firefighter,
Mm,
awesome guy,
mhm.
and he has done that in
That's
the fire
amazing.
stations. Uh, yeah, you just meet all sorts of amazing people who are
Yeah.
doing amazing things, but there's still so much work to be done. I really feel the government needs to be more involved. You know, uh, they always make promises when it comes to mental health, and
Sure.
as far as COVID goes, I think in my humble opinion, one of the good things that come out of COVID is there is a cry for more mental health help.
Yes.
Because look at all of our nurses
Right.
who have PTSD now from going through all that.
Right.
And I work at a mental health facility, and we're full
Mm,
all the time,
I
and got
bet.
people waiting to get in. And we're a large facility, and
Hmm.
it's sad.
It is. It is.
But I think there's a shift. I want to believe there is.
Yeah, I I believe that there is as well. One of the things that I noticed, because I mean I'm a therapist and like I work a lot with like adolescents, and so I'm in the schools a lot. And a lot of schools nowadays they have like a wellfulness break. At some point they stop and they do all this kind of stuff. And like the elementary schools, they have signs everywhere of like the zones of regulation. Like here's how you can detect what you're feeling. They've got like
Hmm.
yoga. Like there really is this big push. I think where the hiccup is, I'm not entirely sure whether it's just that the personnel are not available, whether we are not putting enough resources into these different places, into schools, into the public services, like first responders. I'm not sure where the hangup is, but yeah, I agree with you. I think I definitely see that shift coming, and I would have to agree. It's probably, I think COVID really shined a light on something that was already going on, but it just really revealed the truth of everything. And I think it
Yeah.
made a lot more people aware of what was going on. So one of the things that I think is really amazing about about the group that you have founded, that you've started up, as well as, the advocacy that you have for peer support as well. One of the greatest predictors for the one of the greatest predictors for the symptom severity of PTSD is the size of somebody's perceived social network. That the less people somebody has in that network, the more severe the symptoms, the more people that they feel that they have in that system, the lower the PTSD symptom severity. It's one of the best predictors we've got, one of the best resiliency factors we've got. And so I think that what you're doing is such an amazing precedent to set, such an amazing tool for people to have. And I guess I wonder, from your perspective and just within these groups, what does it, I guess, look like for people to begin interacting, to begin supporting one another? Like what does that look like?
Well, the biggest thing I hear is like a new member will say, I thought I was the only one,
Mm,
which is sends chills down me because that's what I always thought. I thought I was the only one going
right.
through it. And the neat thing that Facebook has added is live chats.
Okay.
So they can talk to each other live.
Mm,
And we got like 4 different chat rooms, and then we monitor them for certain things that shouldn't be going on. But uh, yeah, they just like they're building relationships, and uh, they're seeing that they're not the only one going through it, and
mm,
oh wow, they have the same thing that they're going through, and and then we have people who like just had a bad day and they just want to vent,
right.
and then so then we'll get a staff member on with them to talk to them, so we can also decipher if they need more than just someone to vent to,
Mm,
and then we can try to steer that in that direction. But
mm,
yeah, it's when they first come out the chat rooms, since I'm older, I was like, oh great, something else
uh-huh.
electronic to deal with, and but I was like, this is really cool.
Mm,
Everybody's talking to each other and in real time, and yeah,
mm,
I think the group gives, and it's a closed group,
right.
so it gives them, they feel like it's a safe place for them to talk,
Mm,
because if it was an open group where anybody could join, like
right.
other people from the department who don't have PTSD, they could
Right.
say so and so was on here talking about. So we uh, we monitor that, and
Mm,
they just feel like it's a safe place and they can talk about it. And
mm. Yeah, and it's amazing that they have that resource. It's so terrible that it even has to be that people have to be afraid to talk about it.
isn't it?
It's really terrible.
I used to be ashamed of it,
Right.
and almost felt guilty.
Mm,
And but I just come to the point where I said, yes, I have PTSD. It is a part of me, but it's not who I
Mm,
am. I don't let it define me. I have, a, and because I've done that, I have more good days than I have bad days.
mm,
I still have flashbacks. I still have anxiety. I have all, but I feel like I'm in control,
right.
and it's not. And although there are times I feel like it is in control,
Sure.
but I just feel like because it's like a journey, and at some point in the journey in the beginning, we just kind of, and I think it's out of fear,
Hmm.
and we just waller in it. I
Mm,
have PTSD. That's all I'll ever be. That's all, I
hmm.
can't do anything about it. And people are, I was terrified to go to therapy
Hmm.
because I knew we were going to talk about things that I didn't want to talk about.
Right.
We were going to be ripping band-aids off of old wounds,
Hmm.
uh, but it was hard work, but
Right.
it was so worth it. It
Mm,
was so worth it. I would do it again
yeah.
because it is, yeah, it's what you need to do. And medications, and I feel
Hmm.
they go hand in hand.
Hmm.
I have a picture of a brain walking a tightrope holding a balance beam.
Hmm.
And I picture my medications are on this side and
Right.
therapies on this side, and it balances me on the tightrope.
Yeah.
And uh, so I just, I see so many people who are afraid to go to therapy, but you can't make somebody get help. But eventually you get tired of being afraid. You get tired
Right.
of living like that. And you get ready, and then you're ready to take the step to
Mm,
get the help and to move on. And I just hope that I inspire people to get help,
yeah.
because you can have a normal life.
Hmm.
Define normal. That's the other thing is, uh, I had to learn to embrace the new normal. I
Mm,
always felt this isn't normal. This isn't normal to take meds. This isn't normal to go to therapy. This isn't normal to have flashbacks.
hmm.
And I had to tell myself, what is normal?
Right.
What's normal in Egypt is not normal in, uh, I don't know, Ethiopia,
Hmm.
Uh, so you have to learn to embrace the new normal.
Right.
And for me, the new normal is having PTSD
Hmm.
and coping with it and living my life. It's just like somebody gets diagnosed with diabetes
Right.
all of a sudden. Well, they probably feel like their world's crashing down and, oh my gosh, I got this diabetes. And no, it's the new normal. You,
Right.
you, you press on, you live life, and you do what you have to do to cope with what you got.
Right.
That's kind of the attitude I've adopted. And
Mm, yeah. And I mean, and to go along with your analogy, if you have diabetes, but you just ignore the diabetes and you say, no, I don't have diabetes, I don't have it, I don't have it, the diabetes continues to stick around and it can, even get worse as we continue to try to behave as if everything is still the way that it used to be.
yeah, denial's not a good thing when it comes to some things.
Right. And at the
Well,
same time,
and
it's natural, I think, to want to deny that because that's hard to come to terms with.
it is, but like diabetes is no different than PTSD.
Hmm.
Mental health, and it's because everybody, not everybody, uh, some people attribute mental health issues as being crazy.
Right.
We're not all there. That's not the case. We're showing through imaging and stuff how things like trauma affects the brain
Right.
in certain parts of the brain, and that's part of your body.
Hmm.
That runs your body.
Right.
So it's the most complicated part of your body. It can get damaged too, and it needs to be fixed or repaired or
Hmm.
taken care of. And I just don't see how we It's funny now because I'm
Mm,
looking at it from a different way, but it's frustrating
right.
that we stigmatize mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to go off of what you're talking about, like, that's how I bring it to a lot of my clients a lot of the time because they can have a difficult time accepting that they're in therapy and there are so many times where somebody says to me like I must be like the craziest person you've ever talked to. And it's like,
Right.
no, you like because the brain does fundamentally change with PTSD. Their wires get switched. Wires go in a bunch of different ways. And in fact, the development of PTSD is so incredibly normal given that people are in extraordinary circumstances. Like if you are exposed to trauma, if you're exposed to these extraordinary circumstances time and time again, it is very natural that your brain is going to change to adapt to that you are going to change in order to adapt to that so that your brain can keep you safe. What would be
Yeah.
abnormal is if you were going through all of that and then, just nothing happened. Like it's far more common for people to have some kind of a difference, some kind of a change as a result of that.
Yeah. That's a normal reaction.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, we've got to find a way to be able to continue to survive, and the adaptations that come with PTSD are all our brain trying its best to help us to survive. The hypervigilance that can come that keeps us on edge, ready for danger. That is us adapting to the presence of danger all the time.
Right.
Us shutting down, numbing out, totally dissociating. That is very adaptive if you are exposed to trauma all the time. Um, and so, yeah, I do hope that people can understand how normal it is. But so if you were to be able to talk to somebody now who was teetering on the edge of wanting to go to therapy, but there's just something really hanging them up on it, what do you feel like you would want that person to hear?
That, you know, I think, look at me.
Mm,
I'm evidence that it works.
mm,
I'm not perfect. I'm not, but I'm living my life. And, if you want to live your life, you gotta take some steps. And like you're saying, the biggest thing is acceptance.
mm,
I had such a hard time. It just kind of hit me now that you said that. I didn't accept my diagnosis, my situation. I thought it was the end,
mm,
but it's not the end. But, uh, that's where we need help. We need support groups to
right.
see we're not the only ones going through it. Anytime I run into somebody, I tell them, hey, I have this group. You should join the group. Don't listen to me.
Hmm.
Listen to them.
Right.
They're just like you and me, and they're going through the same thing. And uh, I guess it's just basically try to bring people to the masses to see, hey,
Hmm.
this is okay to be not okay, and that I'm not the
Right.
only one going through it. And look at what getting help has done for these guys. And
Hmm. Right.
yeah,
And I can appreciate that perspective wholeheartedly. Um, and so, I mean, we can understand that, seeking that help and having those support systems, having our peers around, it can be so helpful. And I guess I wonder from your perspective, what do you feel like can push people further into isolation? Like I know you mentioned that was kind of where you had ended up. Like you had isolated and you worked through it through self-medication with alcohol, a very, very common thing that people do. What do you feel like goes into us pulling further away from people, isolating further?
well, I mean, it's easier to shut down when you're
Hmm.
depressed and you have all this. I think we feel like it's easier to shut down, sort of like the check engine light on your car.
Right.
If we ignore it, maybe the car will fix itself and
Mm,
it'll go away. And it doesn't. And it only gets worse. It's the same thing. I isolate, but the problems are still there. And then self medicating is the worst thing you can do because then
mm,
now not only do you have PTSD, but you're having addiction.
right.
And, uh, and I through my research, I found that self-medicating actually sets you further back than if you just would have went and got help to begin with.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I kind of forgot the question.
Yeah, you're all good. You're all good. I mean, first and foremost, you continue to bring up amazing analogies. You're very good at that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You know that the self medication, it is very soothing and it's very very effective in the short term. But yeah, long term, it's another thing that I have to tackle. So it's understandable why people do it, but it can make things far far worse. But yeah, the question was about, why people may isolate instead of reaching out, instead of pursuing that help.
Well, I think depression plays into a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know it did for me, and then the isolating was because I didn't know what was going on, and I was afraid, and I felt like I had no one to talk to about it, to help me figure out. It's amazing. Like my wife, I'll talk to her about something that's bothering me, and she'll tell me exactly what I already know. And it's like, well, I knew that. You didn't tell me anything I knew. I knew that.
Mhm. Oh, oh, man. So you've reached this point now where I know you've gone to therapy, and it sounds like cognitive behavioral therapy was the one you specifically had worked through.
Yes,
Okay, wonderful. What was that process like, if I may ask?
it was hard
Sure.
because we tore down specific calls that bothered me the most
Mm,
and went through them and what my thought process was and talked about the different. I teach CBT now,
mhm,
so it wasn't like that. The 14, we go with 14 distorted thoughts, and
mhm,
we talk about each one. She basically would talk about, like, I would write down how I felt at this point and this point, and then she would dive into it and say, well, what do you think about this? And then she would talk about my thought process
mhm,
and things like that. And it's been so long.
mhm.
It's been like 6 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So what's it like, I guess, being the new you? How do you, I guess, I don't know. I mean, what is it that I guess gives you the meaning nowadays? What is I know you're a behavioral health tech now. Um, so what are things like for you nowadays?
So like life is good. I golf, I go out with friends, I do things, but I have bad days,
Sure.
like where I'll isolate and I don't feel like talking to anybody and, but I have an awesome wife who keeps me grounded and keeps me in check. And she's way smarter than I am, but I won't,
We won't
I
tell
don't want,
her.
I don't want her to hear me, um, but yeah, and like I said, and I'll have a flashback, and she's like, great, she's awesome, she'll talk me through it and stuff, and they don't happen that often, but man, when they do, it's like, oh, where did that come from,
Right.
but life is good, and it just, you know, I just, I'm so glad that I didn't or I wasn't successful at killing myself because I would have missed out on so much.
Mm.
And I have like my granddaughter. She's like the light of my life.
Oh.
She's 5 years old. She calls me Punka. Yeah, that's how it came out when she tried to say Grandpa or Papa. It was Punka. So now
Oh.
all the grandkids call me Punka. But
Oh.
yeah, we all go through hard times, but
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world.
Mm.
You gotta live life,
Mm.
and no matter, I see there are people who have live by the simplest means, and they're, in other countries, and they're so poor, but they're the happiest in the world
Absolutely.
because they're living life.
Hmm.
And we have so much that we take for granted
Yes.
unless your wife reminds you that
Yeah.
you're taking it for granted.
And then that's what we got. We have to have that those
Yeah.
accountability partners. Absolutely. Man, I think one of the things that I try to remind people, because I work with people with trauma, I work with people with addiction, and it's so important for people to be able to remember that even if you have a bad day, or you have a relapse, you have a flashback, you lose your temper, and you've dissociated, whatever it might be, it's so important for people to be able to remember that that doesn't restart the process. Like, you're not back at square
Right.
one, and I know a lot of people can internalize it as like, oh my, I have to start all over like this. I can't believe that I'm
Yeah.
not over this. And it is so important for people to be able to remember that it's, like you have said, it's the new me. Like, it happens sometimes. I can accept that. I can work through it. I can cope with it, and it can continue to I can continue to move forward with it. Um,
Mhm.
and in line with that, I guess the last question I have for you today is, I guess, what do you continue to do to take care of yourself? To do that self care, to you know yeah, to just keep caring about yourself.
I started doing mindfulness,
Yes.
uh, like meditating, and I've found it to be really relaxing, and I don't know, you just kind of feel better about yourself.
Hmm.
And then I do hobbies. I do electronics, see the flashing lights and stuff. I build those as a hobby. Sometimes I'll be stressed out and I'll tell my wife, I just got to solder something.
Uh-huh.
But, and then relationships
Yeah.
and, friendships,
Hmm.
and be there for other people, not get hung up on just helping people, not yourself, but it reminds me that you're not the only one who is going through stuff. Other people are too.
Hmm.
And then just appreciate a dog. I have two dogs, and they're just so amazing. They like can sense your energy and your when you're down and stuff. Uh, they help a lot. Yeah, they're not service dogs or emotional support dogs. They know their job, so
Hmm.
they do it.
Yeah, dogs are amazing companions. I mean, um, what's the word for it? I guess it's like unquestioning love. I can't remember what it is. Like, there's no condition. The unconditional love. There we go.
Unconditional love,
Um,
yeah.
that can come from dogs. They are amazing companions. Um, but yeah, all of that sounds really amazing. And honestly, I think in my conversation with you, it has really helped me to kind of put more things into perspective, and to be able to recognize that there are probably a lot of things that are passing me by that I'm not appreciating very much. Um, and I think it is really important for all of us to be able to take that moment and be able to, enjoy life while it's still here, and enjoy all these things while they're still here, and just to, have those small moments for ourselves. So I do very much appreciate you bringing me that, and I appreciate that you've come and you've shared so much of yourself with us, and you've talked with us, and I'm really hoping that some people out there really get something from this conversation as well. Um, so last thing I'll ask you, so how can people find the group? How can people, yeah, and then just, outside of that, anything that you would like to plug in general?
Well, so the group, if you go to Facebook and just type in Project Hope EMS, and then there is a page called PTSD and paramedics, EMTs, and first responders. And then I started a TikTok,
Hmm.
which is how we met,
Hmm.
uh, kind of on a whim, and it's an amazing platform
It is.
to meet people. I'm surprised how many followers I have. The young kids I work with are like, "Oh, you're TikTok famous."
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"No, I'm not."
The kids love that stuff. Oh.
But all I do is post memes with messages about PTSD and first responders, and um, it's just amazing. Like I'll get responses like, "You have no idea how much these helped me," or
Mm,
yeah, things like that. It's good to hear that they are help, and then that brings people to the group through the
mm,
TikToks also, and then I'm on Instagram, but that hasn't really.
mm.
I don't really understand Instagram, and I definitely don't understand what's that Twitter.
Oh yeah. I've had
I don't get Twitter.
yeah, I hear you. I like just TikTok and YouTube. I get that. I'll stick there.
Yeah,
Oh man. Well, Ken, again, thank you so much for coming and sharing so much with us. You are an amazing dude, and I really appreciate everything that you do, everything that you've continue to do, all the things you've done to me. It's just, yeah, I really appreciate all of that. And it sounds like you have a lot of other people out here who really appreciate you. So, thank you so much for everything.
sure. And thank you for having me on. And it was really nice meeting you face to face.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a pleasure. So I hopefully we can continue to talk here in the future.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
but so thank you also to everybody who is either listening live here on YouTube or you are listening to the podcast later on. Again, my name is Rob. This is the Please Stay Inside podcast. So take care of yourselves, and we will talk again next time.